I recently read a chapter from a book by a man named Andrew Piper called "A Book Was There, Reading in Electronic Times." Piper, in the chapter Take It and Read, waxes poetic about the physicality of the book as an object. Starting with Augustine's Confessions and using that as a springboard, he then traces the history of the book as a physical, spiritual, and intellectual object, tying it into all sorts of ideas. The act of holding a book as prayer, the idea of a book's closedness, adding to the intimacy of reading, and finally tying it into a discussion on the evolution of the book into digital form in the modern era, positing that the act of reading digitally and the act of reading physically are intrinsically different experiences with different feelings involved altogether. A quote that really stuck with me is, "The touch of a page brings us into the world of the book, but the screen keeps us out." He then goes on to discuss how digital text lacks feeling. I wholeheartedly agree. I believe that, especially in the modern era, and even as someone who consumes a vast majority of text digitally, the physical paratextual elements of the book as an object are some of the most important aspects of reading. So, I sat down and asked myself, after reading the chapter, why exactly I felt that way. After all, I have read probably thousands of issues of comics and dozens of ebooks on my phone. The idea of reading digitally isn't altogether repugnant to me. I read the majority of readings for my classes digitally even. I still, however, found myself agreeing very heavily with the ideas presented in Piper's musings on physical text. In a very long section on the human hand, he discusses heavily the aspects of both hands and the way books were designed to fit them. The intimacy that comes from holding a book and peering down into it, the heft to a novel that a digital reader such as a Kindle or cell phone lack. In thinking back to specific reading experiences I have had in the past few years, my mind sticks on three specific novels: House of Leaves, American Gods, and Slaughterhouse-Five, and how the actual shape of the book and the formatting of the page enhance the experience. Leaves specifically is quite literally a novel that functionally could not work on an e-reader, relying too heavily on the physical paratextual elements to enhance the experience. American Gods, on the other hand, has no intentional physical paratextual elements to it outside of the norm. However, while reading it, the experience of doing so with the thick paperback was interesting. A book split into 3 parts, the spine on the paperback actually cracked perfectly at the pages that denoted parts 2 and 3. If I wanted, I could have ripped the book in 3 at these accidental cracks and would have had a perfect trilogy of books. This takes me to Slaughterhouse-Five. Slaughterhouse-Five is a short book, under 50,000 words, not even technically a novel, so to speak. I purchased the cheapest copy I could find, a tiny mass-market paperback with a skull and crossbones on the otherwise fully red cover and pulpy, rough paper on the inside. The text in the book was a serif, almost typewriter-esque font. This, coupled with the novel's intimate and incredibly rambly prose, made it feel like I was reading someone's journal. Fitting, considering the parts of the book that take from Vonnegut's real life. I then think about reading experiences I've had digitally. I consume a lot of manga, and I read the majority of the manga I'm interested in on my phone. I really enjoy reading it too, and can read a lot at once easily. A traditional manga volume is pretty small, about the size of a mass-market paperback. This translates well to a phone screen. But the idea of reading a Western comic, an industry that publishes long, wide paperbacks, makes me uncomfortable. There's too much to look at in a comic like Watchmen that would be lost in digital form. All this comes around to one idea that sticks in my head. An ebook will never be able to capture a feeling quite like that. E-readers, tablets, phones, laptops, what have you, lack the paratextual elements that give personality to a book. Much like Piper, I feel that the book as a physical object is an intimate one that could not and should not be fully replaced by digital media.